Hello and welcome to the Zero Emission Passenger Rail and Trail Project Community Workshop presentation. My name is Riley Gerbrandt, Project Manager for the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission. This recording is a representation of the two community workshop presentations that were held November 12th and 13th in Watsonville and Santa Cruz earlier this year for the Milestone 3 update for this project. As I mentioned before, this recording is a representation of the two community workshops that were held earlier this year for the Zero Emission Passenger Rail and Trail Project community workshops. During those presentations, live Spanish interpretation was available. There were also an opportunity for those in attendance at the live workshops to participate in community activities after the presentation. On the online virtual open house, you have the opportunity to participate in similar workshop style activities and questions. Please look through the different slides on the virtual open house to see where you can provide input on the Zero Emission Passenger Rail and Trail Project Milestone 3 topics. This presentation provides an overview of a few key developments that have occurred in the project concept development as we've entered Milestone 3. They are conceptual alignment, revisions, and updates, as well as proposed station locations and amenities. This presentation also provides information on noise impacts and quiet zones. During the public workshops held earlier this year, there is also an opportunity for community members to meet with the project team and review project information at 3 activity stations to provide community feedback, to ask questions, provide input, and review materials. This same information is available on the virtual online open house, where community members and stakeholders can review information, provide feedback, and ask questions. During this presentation, we'll provide the following information. First, we'll provide a brief project overview, and then we'll provide Milestone 3 conceptual alignment revisions and update information. Following that, we'll provide information on station locations and amenities, and then on noise impacts and quiet zones. During the public workshops, there was also an open house following the presentation where community members could participate in community activities, review information, ask questions, and meet with the project team. First, we will provide you with a brief project overview for the Zero Emission Passenger Rail and Trail Project. The Zero Emission Passenger Rail and Trail Project seeks to provide new high-capacity passenger rail service and stations on approximately 22 miles of the Santa Cruz Branch rail line. The project also seeks to provide 12 new miles of coastal rail trail. These are segments 13 through 20 from Rio de Mar to Pajaro, as well as the Capitola Trestle Reach, segment 11, phase 2. On the map in this slide, the dark blue line provides the conceptual alignment for the passenger rail service. The green line that is dashed provides the alignment for the coastal rail trail that is a portion of this project. You will see segment 11, phase 2 in Capitola, as well as segments 13 through 20. On the slide, you will see that there is an option for segment 17B along San Andreas Road and segment 18A along West Beach Street in the bottom right portion of the screen. These are changes from the previous alignment concepts that were provided during Milestone 2. The Zero Emission Passenger Rail and Trail Project is currently in the project concept development phase. This is the upper portion of this graph on the screen. The project concept development kicked off in October of 2023 and is anticipated to be completed in late spring or early summer 2025. The project concept report will define, evaluate, and develop a project build concept that can be advanced into subsequent tasks. Key milestones of this phase of work included developing the project description and purpose and needs statement, developing preliminary rail and trail conceptual alignments through a process of conceptual alternatives analysis and environmental screening, refining the conceptual alignments into one preferred build concept, and preparing the draft and final project concept reports. Following the completion of the concept report, the Commission will have an opportunity to review the information and determine whether the project moves into the next phase of preliminary engineering and environmental documentation, which could lead to project approval and then right-of-way and final design tasks. For context, the zero-emission passenger rail and trail project is proposed to integrate into the statewide rail and trail network to provide comprehensive and coordinated service to passengers in California. The map on the screen is a depiction of the California State Rail Network in Northern California from the California State Rail Plan. The project also proposes 12 new miles of coastal rail trail in areas where the coastal rail trail was not already under development. These are segments 13 through 20 from Rio Del Mar through La Selva Beach in the city of Watsonville, as well as Capitola Trestle Reach segment 11, phase 2. The map on the screen shows the status of coastal rail trail projects in Santa Cruz County. Next, we will provide an overview of the conceptual alignment updates and revisions for Milestone 3. The zero-emission passenger rail and trail project is in the third milestone of its project concept development process. Milestone 3 is identified on the screen by the green box and the "We Are Here" star. The Milestone 3 key topics include ongoing conceptual alignment revisions and updates, station location and features, and the ridership approach. This Milestone 3 public engagement process follows on from the Milestone 2 public engagement process that was held back in June and July of earlier this year. The Milestone 2 engagement process included seeking community feedback and input on the initial conceptual alignment and the initial analysis of conceptual vehicle types. The Milestone 2 engagements included 2 public open houses, which saw over 100 attendees combined, as well as the virtual online open house, which saw over 1,200 users. We also held briefings with various partner agencies and presentations at community engagement events and with stakeholders. Several hundred comments and feedback were received during the Milestone 2 engagement process. Key takeaways from the Milestone 2 community engagement feedback received regarding the initial analysis of rail vehicle types included a preference for multiple unit vehicles followed by light rail vehicles. Locomotive haul vehicles were less preferred. There was also strong interest in a vehicle that is efficient, reliable, and quiet, and in a vehicle that provides flexibility in terms of connections with other systems, the ability to work with freight service, to accommodate growing capacity, etc. There was also a very strong preference for a vehicle that provided the greatest eligibility for state and federal funding opportunities. Milestone 2 community feedback related to the initial conceptual alignment included feedback on trail alignments and configurations, specifically a desire to keep the trail as close to the branch line corridor as possible, and concerns about the trail width. Also, interest in connections from the rail system to the trail, and concerns about bicycle safety and pedestrian safety on the trail we heard from the community that there's a strong desire for a high-quality trail facility. We also heard that there's a need to ensure system funding opportunities, including maximizing the ability for the system and service to obtain state and federal funds. There was also significant feedback on station locations and connections to the state rail network, and a desire for Santa Cruz and Watsonville stations to be in close proximity to the downtown districts and to synergize with city plans for downtown growth and Santa Cruz bus metro connections. In Watsonville, connections to the existing and planned local trail networks, as well as to South County area beaches, was also expressed. Lastly, concerns about grade crossings, safety, noise, and noise impacts was also received, as well as numerous site-specific concerns and suggestions. The Zero Emission Passenger Rail and Trail project team has worked diligently to progress the project concept development since the end of Milestone 2. After receiving community feedback provided during the Milestone 2 community engagement period and progressing the project designs, we have reached Milestone 3 and are presenting information to the community through various means. On the screen here is a summary of the different Milestone 3 community engagement opportunities that our project team has put together. Earlier in the project milestone engagement period for Milestone 3, we provided 2 informational community sessions, one on October 23rd and a second on October 28th. The first regarding funding and service, and the second regarding the ridership modeling approach. A summary of these informational community sessions is provided on the virtual online open house, where you can also view the recordings from these 2 webinars. There's also a third informational community session scheduled for December 16th that is not shown on this slide, regarding grade crossings, noise impacts, and quiet zones. The project Milestone 3 virtual online open house kicked off on November 7th and is open through December 20th, where community members, stakeholders, and partners can view project information, answer questions, provide feedback, and see additional information relating to the Milestone 3 project developments. These 2 community workshops, including this one today, are another opportunity for the community to engage with the project team, see information, and provide feedback. A public hearing will be held at the December 5th RTC Commission meeting, where the public and the Commission can see information and provide additional input and feedback. The first Milestone 3 key item that we'd like to talk with you about today are the ongoing alignment updates and revisions. Based on the community feedback that was received during Milestone 2, the project's conceptual alignments have been refined and updated. These particular areas are where key refinements have occurred since Milestone 2, and they will be discussed in more detail on the next slides. They are the Beach Street and Boardwalk alignment area in Santa Cruz, the trail alternatives near Jade Street Park and 41st 30th Avenues in Capitola, trail segment alternative option alignments for segments 13 and 18 in the Seascape and West Beach Street alignments in Mid-County and Watsonville areas, as well as the development of alignment options for the station location near Cabrillo College. Following the presentation, please visit the Map Station Activity number 1 to see more detailed plans for each of these alignment options, speak with staff, ask questions, and provide your input. And with that, I will turn it over to Mark McLaren, our project manager consultant from HDR Engineering, who will work with you and talk you through these updates in more detail on the following slides. Thank you.
As Riley mentioned, coming out of Milestone 2, there are several areas where we're looking to resolve some conflicts in areas along the corridor to improve safe operation of the railroad, as well as to accommodate a high-quality trail as committed, as well as incorporating passenger rail back into the railroad right-of-way. One of those first areas that we're going to look at is Beach Street at the boardwalk, where we're looking at a couple of different alternatives to address some of the concerns in that area as it relates to conflicts between pedestrian and rail traffic in an area that's used regularly for emergency and delivery access in and out of the boardwalk, and where we have a high volume of traffic that's coming into the area, as well as looking to access the parking facilities for the boardwalk that are just on the north side of Beach Street. In this location, along the boardwalk, we have 4 different alternatives that we're currently evaluating. There are 2 aerial and 2 at grade, one each for an aerial and an at grade, looking at first of all following the existing rail right-of-way under the log ride and then shifting slightly to the north, coming back into Beach Street. And then the second location actually shifting to the north as the railroad crosses the San Lorenzo River to the north side or the north side of the boardwalk and continues through in that location to provide more space in front of the boardwalk for a lot of the activities that we were talking about. These are those alternatives on the map in front of you, looking at both the location where we would stay within the right-of-way, as well as then pushing the right of the railroad further to the north, away from the immediate front door of the boardwalk in that area, opening the space up for more pedestrian circulation, as well as the delivery and emergency access that we talked about a moment ago. In both of these alternatives, as we move to the west, just past Cliff Street, the railroad stays on the coastal side of Beach Street until it gets over to Pacific and moves back into the dedicated railroad right-of-way to provide for smoother operation of vehicle traffic along Beach Street, as well as in and out of the properties that are on the north side of the street, including the upcoming La Bahia Hotel that is within those blocks. In the area of Jade Street Park, we're actually looking at taking the trail out of the railroad right-of-way through this area. For those of you familiar with this area, in the area between 30th and 47th Avenue, we need to provide a high-quality trail, but the railroad right-of-way is very narrow through this area, and so there's some conflicts in terms of being able to provide the needs of both the railroad as well as for the users of the trail. So we've got a couple of on-street options that we're considering here that would allow us to provide that high-quality facility for the trail, while also being able to accommodate the railroad within the railroad right-of-way and not having conflicts within that area between 30th and 47th. But we are still also considering looking at how we could accommodate the trail in the rail corridor with the railroad. For trail segments 13 through 18, there's a couple of areas where we're also looking at taking the trail off of the railroad right-of-way to better meet the needs of the users of that facility, as well as to reduce conflicts, as well as some options we'll talk about where we're taking the railroad out of the railroad right-of-way to leave the railroad right-of-way as a travel way for the trail. In the area of Sumner Avenue, we are looking at taking this on the adjacent roadway along Sumner because of the number of conflicts that exist with bridges and other structures with many of the crossings that occur through this area. As many of you know, where some of these bridges and structures are located, it'd be difficult to get from the trail down to a public roadway if you were using the trail system. And by putting the trail on the public roadway in that area, we believe we can provide better access and more continuity for the trail through that area for those who want to use it. In doing so, we would also be looking at a number of locations where, because of access to facilities or existing intersections, we would need to do some reconfiguration to ensure that there's safe operation of the traffic intersection while providing protected crossing for the trail users, as well as for the railroad and safe access in and out of the locations that are along those segments of the corridor. Segment 18, which is the segment that goes into Watsonville, is one that we're looking to prioritize as a commitment to fulfill providing some of the trail network in that section of the county. And one of the ways that we're looking at doing that is taking the trail off of the railroad right-of-way, particularly in that area where it comes into Watsonville, and following some alignment options that follow West Beach Street. The benefit of this is that there are a number of railroad spurs, access points into industrial property along the railroad corridor that from a trail perspective are very difficult to cross. We can't necessarily cross a railroad switch easily with a trail. We often have to cross, an ideal way to cross is at a perpendicular angle to the railroad. So by moving out of the railroad right-of-way and over to West Beach Street, we'd have the ability to provide a continuous trail that is not interfered with by the regular crossings or the switches in and out of some of the property that have railroad access along the corridor. And where we begin and end that is with the intent that segment 18 begins at San Andreas Road. We would then follow that up into downtown Watsonville or the area of the depot and look at different alternatives, Lee, Ohlone Parkway, or Walker Street, as the path that continues through that area of the city of Watsonville. I mentioned that there was one location where we're actually looking at taking the railroad out of the railroad right-of-way. This is that location in the area of the Cabrillo Station. The Cabrillo Station is one that serves Cabrillo College at a location on New Brighton Road with the alignment in the existing railroad right-of-way. As you can see from the map, there are a number of curves along this segment of the railroad. And from a passenger experience, smooth operation of the train, and the ability to operate at consistent speed, this number of turns, curves that are in this segment are somewhat of a challenge. And so as we were looking at ways that we could straighten some of these curves out, one of the alternatives that we came up with that we're presenting is the idea of taking the railroad out of the railroad right-of-way, taking it up closer to Highway 1 at the intersection of McGregor and New Brighton, providing the station for Cabrillo College in that general vicinity in a way that would provide better access across Highway 1 for users of the facility, users of the railroad, and the ability to access Cabrillo College from that location. Speaking of stations, another activity that we're asking for your input on is station locations as well as the amenities that would be provided for stations as a part of the project. The map that's provided shows a number of different locations that have been summarized here to differentiate where they came from, but also what the intent is for some of these locations. The first station locations that were identified are station locations that came from the previous TCAA report, as well as options that have been identified for consideration in looking at whether the line would end at the Depot Park Station or at the Natural Bridges Station location in West Santa Cruz. The additional station locations that are listed here are ones that were brought to our attention specifically through the Milestone 2 conversations and interest from people in the community about having better access to public lands, public state parks, and to the public beaches from different areas of the corridor through which or for which there is not easy access otherwise to those locations. We don't necessarily see those as stations that would be in operation 365 days a year as a part of a regular rail service, but they are stations that could serve a need during peak periods of demand, for example, on weekends in the summer. And so as we go through the exercise of evaluating ridership and look at the cost-benefit trade-offs of the number of stations and the travel time along the line, we will be looking at a couple of these locations as well. And we're interested in your input on those as a part of the conversation in this open house. Station locations will be refined and determined based on a number of factors: the evaluation of ridership, understanding railroad operations and safety. Are they in a good location for safe access, not only for the passengers of the train, but also for vehicle traffic in and out of a station location in terms of site access? Is there good transit connectivity to Santa Cruz Metro, as well as the ability to have connectivity to various parts of the community and provide equity and access to the transportation service provided by ZEPRT. We also look at the engineering feasibility. It's important or key to have a platform located along a tangent of a railroad as opposed to on a curve. And we'll also be looking at some of the adjacent uses to understand how people in adjacent areas would be accessing, or the types of uses that would complement the presence of a railroad station and the access to and from it from people who would use it on a daily basis. When we look at the stations, there are some minimum criteria that we have to keep in mind as it relates to the length, the width, the height of a platform. Those things are all in part dictated by the length of the train, dictated by the width in terms of what we have to provide for ADA accessibility and maneuverability on the platform, as well as having safe space adjacent to the track for passengers to be away from the operating railroad, and also providing lighting and visibility and other things that ensure the passenger's sense of safety and security when they're using the system. In addition to these basics, we also can look at and evaluate a number of other amenities. And these are the things we'd like to hear from all of you about what's important to you in the use of the railroad. Is shelter an important element to provide, as well as seating, parking, depending on the location, as well as the ability to have kiss and ride or drop off area adjacent to the site. We also have to look at how ticket vending will be accommodated. Will it simply be a mobile service that you carry on your phone or you buy a pass elsewhere? Or will there be equipment required on the platform to enable you to buy a pass or a ticket once you arrive at a platform before you board the train? Typically also like to provide wayfinding or public information for people to understand how to use the system to get where they want to go, or even to understand wayfinding from the standpoint of if they've gotten off at a station, say in Aptos, and they don't know the area, it would give them wayfinding as to the things that they might want to do, the locations that they want to go, or the services that are available to them nearby. We look at ways that we can accommodate bicycle parking as a part of stations, as well as how we can provide connections to and from the coastal rail trail in those areas where the rail trail may not be immediately adjacent to the station or to the railroad. Finally, one of the other areas that we heard a lot of concern and question about during Milestone 2 was the conversation about quiet zones. So without giving clear indication of the areas where quiet zones would be a part of the project, because that's an ongoing conversation and part of the dialogue that we're asking for your input on, we thought we'd provide some background information today to make sure that everyone has a good understanding of what quiet zones are, what they are not, and how they can be put into effect as a part of the project. The Federal Railroad Administration, as well as California Public Utility regulation over the operation of trains, requires that the engineer has to sound the horn at least a quarter of a mile prior to entering or crossing a public street with an operating train. And that is a requirement that is put in place wherein the horn has to be blown continuously as they go through that crossing. So a quiet zone is basically an exception to that regulation. It allows the train to go through an intersection without blowing its horn. How's that achieved? It's achieved by putting in measures that improve the safety of the operation of the railroad as a substitute for the use of a horn. So that can mean things such as more grade crossing protection in terms of gates, flashing lights, road modifications such as medians, as well as gates for pedestrian crossings in those locations to ensure that there's minimal opportunity for a pedestrian or a motorist to wander into the railroad right away when there's an oncoming train from either direction. At the same time, it's important to acknowledge that an engineer has the responsibility that even with all those things in place, should someone find their way into the railroad right of way and be at risk, it's the responsibility of the engineer of the train to blow the horn regardless of whether it's a quiet zone. But as long as people are following the measures that are put in place and the railroad can operate safely through an intersection, there's no need for the engineer to blow the horn. This is a process that is brought to through request to the Federal Railroad Administration through the work of local jurisdictions. As the railroad owner, as the railroad operator, it is not the RTC that has that responsibility for making that request, although they can partner in different ways with the cities or the county to make these a reality. But ultimately, it's the local jurisdiction that takes on that responsibility. They are looked at on a case-by-case basis, not only in terms of how they're implemented, but how they're funded, and in terms of what mitigation is most affordable to address the concern. While a quiet zone may be a clear option to a lot of people in terms of a way to reduce train noise, there are other measures such as sound walls that can in fact also reduce train noise depending on a location, and may in some cases provide better mitigation depending on how the train operates, the speed, and the adjacent uses that are for which there's concern about being impacted. Typically, this is a conversation that takes place during the environmental process. One of the areas that the environmental process has to address in implementing a service like this is the potential for noise impacts. And so there are technical processes that are followed to identify, first of all, the ambient noise levels. What's the noise that just exists during the day and night within a location? It identifies the sensitive receptors, things like schools and churches and residences that could be affected by significant increases in noise. And then in understanding the noise that would be added in that environment from the train, looking at the various options to mitigate that. So as you think about this project, and as you provide input through this open house, we would ask you to think about, as you think about a quiet zone, what's most important to you in terms of the ways that that might get addressed, as well as understanding and realizing that there is a process that we will take you through. And at the end of that process, if it's determined that there's an impact that should be mitigated, the technical information is done to help the local jurisdictions move forward with that conversation about what a quiet zone would look like in that part of the community. And with that, I'm going to turn this back to Riley. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. On the next slide, I'll tell you how you can continue to stay involved and connected as the project development process continues. There are many ways where you can stay involved and provide your input. As I mentioned before, the project's virtual online open house for Milestone 3 is live, and you can visit the website, provide answers to questions, review the information for Milestone 3, and provide your feedback through December 20th. You can also visit the project website at sccrtc.org/ZEPRT for updates. Email us at ZEPRT@sccrtc.org. Sign up for a mailing list on the project website and attend the Commission public hearing on December 5th. Community members are welcome to provide input at the public hearing on December 5th or through our project website, our mailing list, or email. Thank you very much for attending this project workshop presentation. We really appreciate your attendance and participation in this important process. Public input and feedback is very important to the project team and the development of the project concept. Please take a moment to provide information, to provide feedback on the milestone through information presented, and to stay engaged with the project as it continues through the project development process.